I came home expecting to prep soil for tomato season, and instead I found a full-blown combat arena sitting right on my land. Not near it, not brushing up against the edge, dead center, like someone had decided my farm was optional. And I remember just sitting there in my truck for a second, engine still running, dust hanging in the air, thinking, either I'm losing my mind, or somebody just made the most expensive mistake of their life. Now I've been working that land outside Arroyo Ridge since 2006. 32 acres of processing tomatoes. Nothing glamorous, just steady work. The kind where you know every irrigation line by memory, and you can tell soil moisture by the way it sticks to your boots. My west boundary runs along an old county road, Larkspur Lane, and it's not one of those fuzzy handshake borders either. It's surveyed, pinned, documented 3 different times over the years, because when you farm for contracts, you don't play guessing games with acreage. For nearly 20 years, nobody questioned it. Not the county, not the neighbors, not even the folks who leased adjacent land seasonally. It was quiet, predictable, the way I like things. Then Carter Voss showed up. He bought the parcel next to mine sometime early spring, paid cash from what I heard, closed fast, didn't even blink at the asking price, which already told me he wasn't planning on planting anything. Guys who farm don't move like that. They hesitate. They calculate. They lose sleep over water rights and yield projections. Carter didn't look like that kind of man anyway. First time I met him, I was out checking drip lines at sunrise, coffee still hot in my thermos, and I see this polished pickup roll up like it just came out of a dealership commercial. Door swings open, and out steps Carter, clean boots, pressed shirt, smile just a little too practiced. He walks right over like we're already friends. Starts talking about vision, opportunity, experiential recreation, all these phrases that don't belong anywhere near a tomato field. Then he unrolls these glossy layout sheets right on the hood of my truck, talking about building a tactical paintball complex, leagues, corporate retreats, weekend tournaments, the whole thing sounding more like a startup pitch than anything rooted in dirt. I let him talk, because sometimes people just need to hear themselves. But when he finally paused, I told him plain and simple, my land runs to Larkspur. Everything east of that is yours. Everything west is mine. That line doesn't move. He nodded like he understood, said something about double-checking with his design team, and then he left. And I remember thinking, all right, maybe he's just ambitious. Maybe he'll build his thing and we'll coexist, a little noise on weekends, nothing I can't live with. Farming teaches you tolerance. Weather alone will humble you enough that you don't go looking for extra fights. 10 weeks later, I drove back from a growers' conference in San Antonio, tired, sunburned, already running through planting schedules in my head, because timing matters more than anything in this business. You miss your window. You don't just lose time. You lose contracts, relationships, credibility. I turn onto my field road like I've done 1,000 times, and that's when I hit the brakes so hard my coffee went flying. Because there it was. Not a fence, not a misplaced tractor. A full-scale arena, plywood barricades, inflated bunkers, netting strung high across posts, staging tents, air fill stations, even painted boundary lines on the ground, and all of it sitting across about 8 acres of what was supposed to be my next planting block. And I just stared at it, heart doing that slow, heavy thump, like your body's trying to catch up with something your brain hasn't accepted yet. I actually got out and walked a few steps into it, like maybe it would disappear if I got closer. But no, it was real, boots crunching over gravel that had no business being on my soil. I called Carter right there. He picked up on the second ring, sounding excited, like he was already in the middle of something big. I told him, calm as I could manage, you built your arena on my land. And there was this pause, just long enough to feel intentional, before he comes back with, well, our permit's cleared, everything checked out. Maybe that road isn't the boundary you think it is. Now I don't argue when I already know I'm right. I just said, you need to come look at this, and hung up. Instead of waiting on him, I called someone who doesn't guess. Martin Hale, surveyor, been working valley land disputes longer than I've been farming. The kind of man who doesn't raise his voice because he doesn't need to. He came out the next morning with his equipment, quiet, methodical, measuring, checking records, comparing markers that have been sitting in that dirt longer than Carter's company has existed. I walked with him part of the time, then left him to it, because I didn't need to hover. Truth doesn't need supervision. By afternoon, he found me leaning against my truck, arms crossed, just watching that arena like it had personally offended me. He didn't ease into it, didn't hedge his words, just said, "Every inch of that structure is on your parcel." And I swear, I felt two things at once: relief, because I wasn't crazy, and something else, something heavier, because now it wasn't confusion anymore, it was a problem. Martin drafted a formal notice that same day, clean, precise, backed by every record that matters, and we had it delivered to Carter's office. 30 days to remove everything. Not negotiate, not discuss, remove. And for a moment, I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I really did. But I should have known better, because men who build that fast don't back down that easy. 30 days sounds like a long time, until you're the one watching your season slip through your fingers one sunrise at a time. And I wish I could tell you Carter took that notice seriously, shut things down, started hauling equipment out. But what he actually did was double down, like the whole situation was just a minor inconvenience he could outspend. The first weekend after the notice went out, I woke up to the sound of air compressors humming across my field. Not faint either, loud enough that it carried through the morning stillness like a generator at a construction site. I drove out there, and what I saw, it wasn't just still standing, it was operational. People in jerseys, masks, running drills, paintballs popping like distant firecrackers, bright splashes of color hitting plywood that was sitting on top of soil I'd spent years conditioning. I parked along the edge and just watched for a minute, hands on the wheel, knuckles tight, because anger doesn't hit me fast, it builds, slow and steady, like pressure in a pipe. And right then, it was building. Carter spotted me eventually. You could tell by the way he walked over, not rushed, not apologetic, casual, like we were meeting at a barbecue instead of standing on stolen ground. He pulled off his mask, sweat on his forehead, smiling like business was booming. "Hey," he says, like nothing's wrong. "You should see the turnout. First weekend, and we're already at capacity." I didn't return the smile. "You got my notice." He shrugged, actually shrugged, like paperwork was just background noise. "Yeah, my legal team's reviewing it." "Review faster," I said, keeping my voice level, "because that equipment needs to be off my land." And this is where his tone changed, not loud, not aggressive, just colder, more calculated. "We've invested close to 300 grand into this build," he says, gesturing around like he's showing off a finished product. "Permits, materials, labor. We didn't just guess here." I took a step closer, close enough that he had to look me in the eye. "Then you should have spent a little of that money verifying your boundary." For a second, neither of us said anything. Just the sound of paintballs cracking in the background, people shouting, laughing, like two completely different realities were happening in the same place. Then he leans in slightly and says, almost under his breath, "Boundaries can be interpreted." And that's when I knew this wasn't a mistake anymore. This was a decision. I didn't raise my voice, didn't threaten him. I just nodded once and said, 30 days. Then turned around and walked back to my truck. Because once someone shows you exactly who they are, arguing just wastes time. So I stopped talking and started preparing. We filed in Superior Court that same week. Agricultural land use violation, encroachment, damages, everything documented down to the inch. Martin backed every claim with surveys, county records, aerial overlays going back years. There was no gray area, no wiggle room. Just a clean, undeniable fact. Carter built on land that wasn't his. Meanwhile, he kept operating. Every weekend, more cars, more players, louder crowds. At one point they started hosting tournaments, banners, food trucks, music, like it was some kind of festival. And every time I drove past it, I felt that same pressure building in my chest. Not just anger now, frustration. Because farming doesn't pause for legal battles. The ground doesn't wait. Contracts don't care that someone else decided to play war games on your soil. I had a cannery agreement that season, fixed delivery windows, penalties if I missed them. I had transplants scheduled, crews lined up, irrigation timed. And all of it hinged on those 8 acres being ready. They weren't. Weeks went by like that. 1, then 3, then 6. Each one costing me money I couldn't get back just by winning a case. You don't recover a lost season. You just absorb it and hope you're still standing next year. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Carter's lawyers reached out. Thick envelope, Sacramento firm, polished language, The kind that tries to sound reasonable while saying something completely unreasonable. Their offer, and I still remember laughing when I read it, was to lease me my own land. Temporarily, they said, while they resolved boundary discrepancies. They'd pay a fee, let me use what space remained around their structure, like I was supposed to work around an arena that never should have existed. I sat at my kitchen table that night, letter in hand, staring at it longer than I should have. Not because I was considering it, but because I was trying to understand the mindset behind it. The confidence, or maybe the arrogance, to think that was a solution. I called Martin. You ever seen something like this? I asked him. He didn't hesitate. I've seen people try. Doesn't end well for them. Good, I said, folding the letter slowly, because I'm done being patient. The court process moved, not fast, not slow, just steady, like everything else tied to land disputes. Filings, responses, hearings scheduled weeks out. And through all of it, Carter kept that place running like nothing was wrong. If anything, he leaned into it harder. Marketing campaigns, social media ads, fastest growing arena in the region. I even had a neighbor mention they were thinking of bringing their kids there. Didn't realize they were talking about land that wasn't even legally his. 17 weeks after we filed, we finally got in front of a judge. Now here's something you don't expect. Judge Eleanor Whitaker, third-generation grower herself before she ever stepped into a courtroom. Almonds, from what I heard. Which meant she understood timing, understood what it means when land sits unusable during a critical window. You could see it in the way she listened, not just to the legal arguments, but to the implications. Carter's team tried everything: permits, investment, good faith development, even questioning historical boundary interpretations. They spoke like this was a complex gray situation, something that needed compromise. Then Martin testified. No emotion, no theatrics, just facts. Coordinates, markers, certified surveys, county filings. Clean, precise, impossible to twist. And when he finished, the room felt quieter. When it was my turn, I didn't give a speech. I just told the truth. How long I'd worked that land, what those 8 acres meant, what it cost to lose them when I did. No exaggeration, didn't need it. The judge leaned back at one point, hands folded, looking from one side to the other, and you could almost see the decision forming before she even spoke. Her ruling came a few days later. Clear, direct, no ambiguity. Carter had 30 days to remove every structure from my land, every post, every bunker, every piece of equipment. If he failed to comply, I was authorized to remove it myself and bill him for the full cost of demolition and damages. I remember reading that order twice, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to be absolutely sure it said what I thought it said. For the first time in months, things felt settled. Or at least they should have. Because here's the part nobody tells you about people like Carter. They don't always lose when the judge rules against them. Sometimes they just decide the rules don't apply. And those 30 days came and went, without a single truck pulling anything out. Day 30 came and went so quietly it almost felt like a joke. No crews, no trucks, no attempt to comply. Just another weekend of games. More people running across ground that had already cost me months. I drove out there that evening, parked in the same spot I had been using for weeks, and sat there with the engine off this time, listening to the distant pops of paintball markers echo across land that should have been rows of green by then. And I remember thinking, not angry anymore, just done. Because there's a point where frustration burns itself out, and what's left is clarity. I went home, pulled the court order back out, set it on the table, read it one more time, slow, line by line. Especially the part that mattered. Authorized to remove it myself. Billable to the responsible party. No loopholes. No conditions. Just a straight line from problem to solution. I called Martin first. You still got your clipboard? I asked. He chuckled a little, like he already knew where this was going. Always do. Good. I said, be out here at sunrise. Next call was the sheriff's office. Not because I needed permission, but because I didn't want surprises. I explained the situation, referenced the case, the order, told them exactly what I planned to do. The deputy on the line paused for a second, then said, as long as you've got documentation, we'll note it. Which was all I needed. I didn't sleep much that night. Not out of nerves, just anticipation, I guess. Not the kind you get before something exciting, More like the kind you feel before you finally finish something that's been hanging over you too long. Sun came up slow the next morning, that pale gold light stretching across the field, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was about to take control of something again. The dozer fired up with that deep, familiar rumble, the kind that you feel more than you hear, steady, reliable, honest. Martin showed up right on time, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other, already in work mode. He didn't say much, just nodded once and started marking things down. I drove straight toward the nearest set of bunkers, those plywood walls they'd painted up to look tactical, and I didn't hesitate. Blade down forward. The first impact wasn't dramatic. No explosion, no big cinematic moment. Just wood giving way under pressure it was never meant to handle. Cracking, collapsing, folding into itself like it had been waiting for this. And I remember thinking that's it? That's what all this trouble was built on. After that, it got easier. One structure after another. Netting came down in long sagging sheets. Poles snapped. Inflatable barriers burst with these dull, hollow pops that sounded almost pathetic compared to the noise they used to make during games. My crew moved in behind me, loading what could be hauled, stacking debris, clearing paths, efficient, focused, nobody talking much, because we all understood what this was. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. About halfway through, a truck came tearing down the access road, kicking up dust like it was trying to outrun what was already happening. Carter jumped out before it even fully stopped, his operations manager right behind him, both of them looking like they'd just realized something irreversible was underway. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted, walking fast toward the dozer. I cut the engine, stepped down slow, not rushing, not matching his energy, because I didn't need to. "I'm finishing what you were ordered to do," I said, pulling the folded court order from my back pocket and handing it to him. He didn't take it right away, just stared at me, jaw tight, like he was trying to decide whether anger or denial was going to help him more. Then he snatched it, scanned it quickly, like maybe the words would change if he read them fast enough. "You're destroying private property," his manager cut in, voice sharp, already halfway into panic. I nodded once. "No, I'm removing structures from my property. There's a difference." Carter looked past me then, at the field, at what used to be his arena, now reduced to broken lines and scattered debris, and for the first time since I'd met him, he didn't look confident. He looked small. Not physically, just the kind of small you get when reality finally catches up. "We had bookings," he said, quieter now, like saying it softer might make it more reasonable. "Events, season passes. And I had a planting schedule," I replied, just as calm. "Contracts. You ignored yours. I'm honoring mine." There wasn't much else to say after that. He stood there for a while longer, like he might argue, like he might call someone, but eventually, he just stopped, turned, walked back to his truck, and drove off slower than he arrived. I climbed back into the dozer, fired it up again, and kept going. By the time the sun dipped low that evening, most of it was gone. And by the end of the second day, all 8 acres were clear. Not perfect, not ready yet, but free. Soil exposed again, breathing, like it had been under something heavy and finally got a chance to reset. When I shut the machine down that final time, the silence felt different. Not empty, just settled. Over the next couple of weeks, we worked that ground back into shape, remediation, leveling, repairing what had been compacted or contaminated. It cost money, more than I would have liked, but not as much as losing another season. The court followed through, too. Carter was ordered to cover legal fees, remediation costs, a total that came out just north of $40,000, and from what I heard, his investors weren't too thrilled about how things played out. That arena never reopened anywhere nearby, and every now and then, someone asks me if it was worth it. All the time, the stress, the fight. I usually tell them the same thing. It was never really about the arena. It was about the line. Because once someone decides your boundaries are optional, if you don't push back, they stay that way. Now here's the part one still think about sometimes, late at night, when everything's quiet and the fields are finally where they're supposed to be. Could I have handled it differently? Maybe pushed harder earlier, maybe escalated faster, maybe even tried to negotiate before it got that far. Or maybe it only ever ends one way, when someone builds on land that isn't theirs and refuses to take responsibility. I don't know, but I do know this. The tomatoes grew just fine that season, maybe a little late, but strong. And that line along Larkspur Lane? Nobody's questioned it since. So I'm curious what you think. Was I justified in tearing it all down myself the second I had the legal right? Or should I have given him more time, more chances, maybe found a middle ground somewhere in all that mess? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because situations like this, they're never as simple as they look from the outside, and I want to hear where you stand.